TJM Angling. Today I'm at Newton Park and I've just caught this one. First fish of the day, taken on the first cast. It's probably about £12, a lovely little fish. That was first cast, so we'll pop him back, and today we're going to show you how to tie the surface rig that I normally use and some other little tips and tricks that I use for surface fishing. So let's pop this one back, see if we can get another one, and then show you that rig. Here are the components we need to tie our surface fishing rig. The essential parts are a good floater line, so I use the Corda cruiser control line in £12. I think £12 the best one personally. I know it's the strongest they do, but I don't see any point going any weaker really. And then we obviously need swivels, hooks. I go for size 8 wide gapes. You can go smaller, it's just up to you what you prefer, but I found size 8 works quite well for me. And then scissors, and then a surface float. You can also use like the long ones with like a tube coming out here, but for this I like to use the skittle for close range and then the other type for longer range. Non-essential bits can be floating putty, which just helps keep the line from sinking if you're not using floating braid or whatever, because at Bathampton where I normally fish we're not allowed to use braided mainline apart from spodding, so that's for that. And then I prefer to use bait bands rather than a hair or gluing it on, but that's just personal preference. So let's go and show you how to do the first step now. For this first step we need scissors, our floater line, and then our hooks. So we can start off by getting a length of line, and then it depends what length you want your hook length to be. I personally go for 3 to 4 foot. I know some people go for really long, like 6 foot, but I'm not really too bothered how close it is to the float, but 3 to 4 foot I'd say is just right. So we've cut our line, and then we just need to get a hook out the packet and tie that bit on, and then that's half our rig done already. There's only a few steps to tying a surface rig the way I tie it, so it's super simple. So to start tying the hook on, if you watch my zig video I do it exactly the same way with a Palomar knot. So that's just push it through the eye of the hook and then just simply push it back through, so you're running up on a doubled up piece of line, and then all you need to do is tie a little overhand loop knot the same way you tie a hair, like so, and then pop the hook through the loop you've just created here. Can be a little bit fiddly, especially when you're tying it with mono, because obviously it is a little bit slippery and stuff. There we go. And then all we need to do is tighten that down. Give it a moisten as well before you pull it down tight. You could use a rig puller on the hook just to make sure it's super tight, but there we go, that's our hook tied on. Then all we need to do is just trim the tag end, and then all we need to do after the next step is tie the swivel on. So let's go and show you how to do that now. For this second step, all we need is the hook that we've tied onto our hook link so far, and a swivel. And how we're going to tie the swivel on is exactly the same as the way we tied the hook on. It's with a Palomar knot. So just to show you that again, it's just to pass it through the eye and then back through, so it's running up on a doubled up piece of line. Make sure you give yourself enough to work with, and then just tie an overhand loop like so and pop it through there and pull it tight. And then all we need to do is trim the tag end again. Like so. It doesn't have to be too short, as the bait's quite a distance away from the actual swivel arrangement. And there we go. Our complete rig is tied a bit shorter than it normally is, just for the sake of the video, but 3 to 4 foot's the usual, so there we go. If you do want to tie a hair, then obviously just tie a normal rig, like a bottom bait rig, but with the mono, and tie a hair into it with a knotless knot. And if you're using bread bands by Nash, which I use quite often, if I do fish with bread, as I think they're really good, and it's the only way I've found to fish bread effectively, then obviously you thread it up the hook link and onto the eye of the hook before you tie the swivel on. So that's that. Let's show you how to set it up onto the main line, and then we can cast it out and hopefully have a few fish. Here's the rig that I used to catch that nice 12-pound common earlier. Starting off, this is going back to the reel this way, so this is going towards the hook link. This can only be called really a mouse drop in. It's quite a long sausage of floating putty, but that's only because we're not allowed to use floating braid, so it just keeps the line up and stops it sinking. Another great tip, if you don't want your line to sink, is use Vaseline or grease, and that will just break the surface tension and keep the line floating up in the water. And that's probably a foot above the float. This is the other style of float that I was on about, as I am using it at range, so it's just a little bit better than the skittle float. These are the old designs from Corda. They have updated them, so they're more white and minimalistic, but I quite like these. But once these break, then I'll have to add the other ones to my arsenal. And then that's just tied to the swivel using a Palomar knot, which pushes inside the float, like so. It just keeps it all nice and snug. It's a sort of a bolt rig effect, and hooks the carp as they swim off. And then going 2 foot down the hook link, we've got another sausage of putty just to keep everything floating up and keep it on the surface. And then going down to the hook, so this hook link's probably about 4 foot in length, like I said earlier. We've got the hook tied on with the Palomar shown earlier, and just a bait band. You can drill the hole in the pellet and then use the bait band as a hair, but I prefer just to have it on the shank of the hook and stretch the bait band so the pellet sits inside it. If you do use a hair, then remember to tie it nice and short, as you don't want too much of a gap between your bait and the hair, and the hook, sorry. Otherwise the fish won't take it in one movement, because obviously usually carp are bottom feeders as the shape of their mouth, but they do obviously take it off the surface as well, but that's just something to bear in mind. And if you're gluing the bait on the back of the shank of the hook, then obviously you don't need the bait band, and it can just be like that, and then glue it on the back of the shank. But make sure it's trimmed, and a good little tip is to have a little groove so it sits nice and flat against the shank of the hook. So let's cast this out and see if we can get another fish, but if not, we've had a great day, but hopefully we could have a few more. I had to show you this one, as I think it's my old PB. He's a little bit down from when I caught him 2 years ago. He was 15, he's now only 13, but still a beautiful fish. I recognise him because of his scale pattern. There he is, beautiful fish, caught off the surface again on the surface rig, another wonderful fish. Let's pop him back. Just before we finish, I know some of you are probably thinking about bait. I usually use the Sonya Baits oily pellets in 11mm, as I found them to be really good, to be honest. I bought them when I started fishing. It's obviously not the same packet, but I found them to be good. It's a resealable packet as well, so it can stay fresh as well. I just found them really good. I haven't really found an oily pellet that's quite as good as these. Other stuff I use, a similar size to the 11mm Sonya Baits, these are by Nash. They smell of strawberry and they're also 11mm, but they're not oily. They just give off a scent. I usually use these as hook baits on the bait band, so as they're usually flatter and a bit more square, and they obviously work as add that bite straight away. Other stuff I use is these little riser pellets by Nash. I bought these a while ago and it's lasted me for ages. These are tiny, they're about the size of micro pellets, a couple of millimeters big, like so, and that just gets the fish on a different size of bait rather than going for the 11 mils all the time. And then I've also got just a big bucket full of generic dog biscuits and crumb and that sort of thing, like that. Just keeping it different, I suppose. Keep them guessing. Don't stick with the same size. As it is dog biscuits, and I've got some that are shaped like bones and other little shapes, just to keep them guessing with different colours and smells. But usual chum mixers work well. I buy them regularly just to top up my mix, and then as they're cheap, you could buy like a big bag for a couple of quid. It's probably a really good bait to use. But stuff like this, then I got these for £3.49 from a fishing shop up in Chip and Sodbury, where I live, and I use these mainly like as an extra rather than the primary bait, as otherwise it would get a bit expensive. Other baits that work well, bread. I've caught plenty of fish on bread. Brimsham Park, where I sometimes go, then they love bread. There's lots of people feed the ducks there, so the fish have got used to bread. Other things I tend to use, you can make maggots float if you fill the tub with water and then drain it off and let them dry it in the sun. Then I found they float, which is a bit weird, but I've had a couple of fish on floating maggots as well, and used a little rubber one on the hook. But that's really it for floating baits. You can use stuff like sloppy spob mix to really cloud up the area. I've had that quite successful as well. That's mainly obviously over zigs rather than floater fishing. But if you've got lots of fish and you don't really want to feed them but get them all in, draw them into the area, then that could be a good option. But my main go-to is the pellets, and then I go over to bread. So I hope you found that helpful with a little bit of bait. So let's cast out and see if we can get some more fish. Here we are, we've just caught our third fish of the day. Really has been a good session today on the surface. This one is £16. Very lively. He was taken from the back of my swim, as I saw him lurking near the back with a few other fish, but this is definitely the biggest one out of the lot. So £16 just over. Beautiful fish. Great way to end the day, so shows surface fishing is really good. So let's pop this one back and maybe we might get one more before we go, but definitely a great day. Well then, that's all for this edition of TJM Angling. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this how-to guide on a floater fishing rig useful. It's the usual floater fishing rig that I use when I do my fishing, and I've had great success on it. I think the motto is just to keep it simple and then you'll catch the fish. Another tip for when you're floater fishing is I had that fish within seconds of the bait being out, probably about 10 seconds, but I was feeding the fish for a good half an hour beforehand. So make sure you've got plenty of fish feeding and they're sort of Pac-Manning it down at a good rate, so they don't really think about it. If you've only got one fish feeding, then it's probably best if you leave it and wait for more fish to come in. Because I had one or two feeding, but they were really cagey. But then a couple more came in and there's a bit of competition. So just wait and sit on your hands until you've got a good couple feeding, and then cast out, and then hopefully you should have some beautiful fish like that comment at the start of the video. So that's all for this edition. Remember to like, comment and subscribe, and in the meantime, enjoy your fishing.